Let's get started.
Pee Wee Herman has eyes for only one thing, his bike, and he's not the only one. After the bike is stolen, Pee Wee must embark on a cross-country adventure to find it before it's lost to him forever while meeting all sorts of people in the process.
Rebecca, we both chose this movie for obvious reasons. Tell the cinema community a little bit about why you wanted to choose this movie.
I wanted to choose this movie because, spoiler alert, it's one of Teresa's favorite movies. So I'm totally pandering to my audience here.
The audience and the cinema community at large.
But I also find this movie is a hallmark of alternative comedy, especially here in America. Paul Reubens is an iconic figure, and this was a lot of people's first introduction to him, not just Pee-wee's Playhouse. I'm also a sucker for Tim Burton. This is Tim's first live-action film that he's directed. He has many of his frequent collaborators, especially his early team, like, say, Danny Elfman. A lot of people know Danny Elfman. And a lot of his hallmarks are very clearly defined in this movie. It's also just a fun movie to pop on and enjoy, and even besides the nostalgia quotient.
Well, and obviously you're pandering to your cinema community. Right?
My personal cinema
Your
community.
personal cinema community. It's no surprise to Rebecca, and our cinema community will over time hear how much I love this movie. And I know some people love Paul Reubens. Some people don't like Paul Reubens on a personal level. However, I would say, even if you're not the biggest fan of him, I would say give this movie a chance. It's hilarious.
It's very cheeky.
It's cheeky. It's hilarious. It's a clean movie.
Mostly clean.
Mostly clean. However, it's funny. The movie was written with Phil Hartman, one of our family favorites.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil Hartman's hilarious. This movie brings back such wonderful memories to me. I was 15 when I saw this. I remember seeing it in the summer. You know, great guy I was dating at the time, super fun guy. We laughed so hard. We saw this in the theater. We laughed so hard. We were crying. It was so funny. And now here I am, fast forward, right? In my 50s, still think it's a funny movie. Still, as you said, cheeky.
One of the things I love about this movie is it's a love letter to Hollywood, but it also mercilessly just lampoons Hollywood.
Oh, it does. And I like the phrase, it's a love letter, because it's not mean. It's not mean-spirited at all. But there's a lot of nods, a lot of, as you were saying, different movies were brought to mind after watching this, different scenes. You were paralleling a Marilyn Monroe movie to this, Shirley Temple movie. You're like, how can a guy in a tight little red suit, a little gray suit with a little red bow tie, how in the world does that even work? And yet it does.
I think the thing that really helps this movie is Pee-wee's not maliciously trying to ruin people's lives. He's just on this
He's
quest.
just doing it. He's not trying, but it's just so happened.
He's on this quest, and this quest kind of takes him through this journey where people, whether they like it or not, are forced to encounter the force of nature that is Pee Wee Herman.
Well, and that's a good point. This is definitely a road trip movie, meaning all the different people he meets, and everyone likes him.
I can think of 2 people who don't.
Oh.
But even then, these people are still
he wins them over.
Are affected and changed by Pee Wee.
Well, how do you not meet him and not be changed?
That's a really fair point, because Pee Wee provides such a contrast to everyone he meets. It's not like you meet one person who's like Pee Wee. The closest thing you can meet to Pee Wee is still somewhat different and is more grounded in reality than Pee Wee is.
I'm just laughing. I'm like, how many people in your life have you met like Pee Wee? They look like him, they dress like him. I think if you met him, your life would be different, because you're like, I've never met anyone in my life like you. But I think that there's a part where there's a young quality to him. However, he's an adult. He has his own house. He maintains his own house. He makes his own breakfast, clearly. There's a whole machine for this. Takes care of his dog.
Dog looks pretty healthy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's see what he's feeding him, a bowl like the size of your head, right? It's like, yeah, I think the dog's okay. But yeah, I would say the movie for what it is. Understanding it's quirky, it's silly, you'll find yourself laughing at parts, the lines were good, the acting. We say acting, right? Is this based on a true story? Is there I remember when this movie first came out, and I can't remember when he stopped doing it. The movie came out in 85, but he was for multiple years doing interview on talk shows and things as Pee Wee Herman, as if he's the real deal. Not, oh, I'm Paul Rubens dressed up like this character. It's like, I am that person.
That was my understanding too. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he also show up at the Oscars as Pee Wee Herman at one point?
I think he did, actually, which is so sad. I just remember all the lines in the movie and the Oscars. I'm like, blip. But I remember he went on like David Letterman and some of the other, Jay Leno, and he was Pee Wee. So to say, is this based on a true story? I laugh because back in the day you go, maybe it was, but truly no.
Well, it's kind of like the Muppets. The Muppets are the Muppets.
Oh no, you're telling me the Muppets aren't real?
No, but I mean, in the minds of a lot of people, the Muppets are their own people. You're not thinking of a little hand going. It's just the Muppets are the Muppets, and it's just funny to see people treat the Muppets like the Muppets. They're not trying to break the illusion.
No, and I think that there's something pretty sweet about that in a way, because you like the characters, you like the people, and even though in the back of your logic brain, right, you go, oh, that's not real, this is just somebody dressing up, there's a certain part, like you said, it doesn't break the illusion.
But it definitely provides an interesting contrast to Rubens' other roles.
Correct, which we'll be talking about in Mystery Men. He's not a one-trick pony, which is nice.
Well, and then the other film that I advocated for this retro rewind and was shot down by our Cocoon cast team was Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, right.
And he kind of plays like a really comedic interpretation of a vampire. But the most that people see him is Pee Wee.
Well,
so when you see anything else, it just rips that.
Well, and he is more versatile. I remember he played, I believe it was in the early 90s, he played on Murphy Brown with Candace Bergman. He was like her assistant. She like went through like all these assistants, and he was one of them, and he was nominated. I can't remember if he actually won, but he was nominated for an Emmy.
Wow.
For that role. And I'm thinking, that's hilarious. Because, it's just a small role. It's inconsequential. You go, oh yeah, she's had all these assistants. But he made an impression. And like we talked about, we're going to contrast Pee-wee's Big Adventure to Mystery Men, which there's a whole story about that one.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. But yeah, no. And I think that's the part where we're talking about, is it still funny? And we talked about kind of having cult status. So this movie had a relatively small budget initially. I think it was, $7 million? And it went to, oh my goodness, it made a ton of money, which is ironic in of itself.
It's safe to say that if this movie had not succeeded as well as it had, and especially with Beetlejuice, Tim Burton would not be directing today. At least to the level that he has been granted.
Well, and that's what we're saying, right? So a $7 million movie made almost $41 million. Launched Tim Burton. Danny Elfman did the music, and prior to that, he was Oingo Boingo only.
Oingo Boingo exclusive.
Yeah, I was going to say that first. Oingo Boingo early. Yeah, but that brought him on the scene. And then he did Beetlejuice also for Tim Burton in 88.
Believe so.
Correct. Yeah. So that partnership between, and even I remember when Paul Rubin had passed away, Danny Elfman had put this really nice post. He was doing a concert, and he really acknowledged the difference that his career had taken because of working with Paul Rubin in this movie.
I think it's kind of cool because Paul Rubens really wanted to see the best in people. And I think of this movie as him getting all of his buddies together and going, what can we do on a weekend and just have some fun?
Well, and I love the fact we were talking about Phil Hartman and have a real soft spot for Phil Hartman. Love Phil Hartman. And I know you know him more from News Radio, but he was Saturday Night Live, and he's done a ton. And he is wicked funny. And he did a few cameos in the movie as well. He was the voice of the rodeo. If you've seen the movie, you see the rodeo scene, you're like, that's Phil Hartman at the end. He's one of the photographers. But it wasn't, I have to be front center.
And Phil is an amazing I don't know what the actual clinical term is. Impressionist?
Impressionist.
Impressionist. Thank you. I'm
I don't know
forgetting.
that that's a clinical term. I don't think.
Well, I mean,
I don't think the psychology community goes, that's something. I think that's
I
more
mean,
of a
clinical as in like clinical studies or like
clinical study.
comedic studies, I guess.
Comedic study.
I just got off work. I'm tired.
Now he's a rat, and
I think it's really cool to see all these people really try to show that this is Paul's story.
or Pee Wee, as the case may be. Well, and
But Paul also takes in stuff from his personal life. You and I were talking about one specific costume sequence where he literally takes someone from his own life and goes, "How can I include this in here?"
No, and it's hilarious because if you're that person, it's his relative, it's his sister, right? So if you're Paul's sister, can you imagine if my brothers did that? I'd be like, hey, that's me. What are you doing? Well, and there's so much of him in this movie. We talked about the set design.
Yes.
Much of the props, if you will, the furniture, everything was Paul Rubens' collection. So there's a big part. I don't know if the Mr. T cereal was his, but the other pieces were his.
See, now I kind of want to see, like, it's too late, unfortunately. I wish they did like an architectural digest feature on his
my
house.
goodness,
Like,
architectural digest.
How close is the Pee Wee house to Paul Rubens' actual house?
Well, and I've seen pictures of the house since then, and in the movie it was like a bright red and it was like painted white, and they were saying his neighbor, his nemesis, Francis, house was listed, I think they said like 17 million, and they had to relist it at like 12 million. I'm like, 12 million? That's a little crazy. I'm not sure how much the Pee Wee house sold for, but apparently you can drive by it or something. But it's like this, innocent little white house. It doesn't have all the, crazy Pee Wee effects to it.
Fun fact, Amy Doan, the owner of Sugar Pill, she was talking about how she used to jog by the Pee Wee house.
Oh my goodness.
Every morning because she used to live over
So
there.
this is inspired. So Sugar Pill, tell our cinema community about Sugar Pill.
Sugar Pill is probably one of my favorite cosmetics company. Shameless plug. I love them.
Well, and I laugh because bright, and she jogs by the Pee Wee house. So maybe there's some inspiration that you just don't even know about. Well, and let's talk about, we talked a little bit about the acting. Clearly, I think it was a well-cast movie.
Nobody was overbearing. That's the big concern I have with films like this is you have a lead character who's clearly defined. Mm-hmm. Is anybody going to upstage them? And instead, I find myself appreciating how the cast is complementing each other.
Well, and I was reading, so Dottie, who has a crush on Pee Wee, he has not much interest in her, which is funny because he has an awareness that she likes him, but he just kind of pushes her off, but keeps her close. Kind of, I don't know if that's a clinical issue, but it was kind of interesting. But I was reading the part of Dottie, Phoebe Cates. They had considered Laura Dern. They had considered just multiple women that we know as actresses today.
I'm just picturing Laura Dern as Dottie. It's a very
maybe, but it's just, it goes back to, in previous episodes we talked about, I believe the cast is cast the way it is. I know Tim Burton does a cameo.
Yes.
In A Dark Alley,
it's a
which
very
is
blink and miss it.
It's
cameo.
a blink and you miss it. But just a lot of characters even today. Large Marge. Apparently she does not blink. If you look closely, she doesn't. I say I want to look at you and not blink, but she doesn't blink.
Oh, you blinked.
Yeah, right. Madame Ruby. Right. I mean, there's just iconic characters that I laugh at all these years later. I still remember the characters and I could still tell you what they say.
Well, and some of these characters are 5 lines or less. But they still make an impression in this movie.
Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy.
I can't imagine. So I would say that's a big part. The music, we talk about Danny Elfman. I remember when you were younger, we would play the soundtrack before you even were able to see the movie.
That's correct. I remember going to school, and this is one of the CDs we would throw on.
That's right. And the movie was enhanced so considerably with this music.
There's one sequence in the beginning where the music adds itself to kind of the bombastic nature of the film. And I feel like without that, you would lose some of the passion that kind of powers this film.
Well, it is energetic. Danny Elfman's music has always been very energetic. And I remember years ago we had talked about his music, and he tends to compose starting backwards, moving forward versus going forward to moving backwards. And how many xylophones and bells and it's just his music is iconic, right? Edward Scissorhands, he's Batman movies, he's done a ton.
And they're not all Tim Burton movies.
No, that's a good point actually.
And he's worked really closely with Sam Raimi for the original Spider-Man trilogy with Tobey Maguire.
Oh, and the favorite one I remember was the Men in Black.
I still like the Men in Black
The
soundtrack.
Men in
Barry
Black.
Sonnenfeld is awesome.
Correct, and that's the point though. The music makes the movie, and like you said, there's this partnership between all of them. I know we talked a little bit about the screenplays or anything else. Any other thoughts you had around that, or
The screenplay is fun because there are moments such as when Pee-wee is trying to illustrate the importance of his bike being lost and anything he can do to find it. There's a joke that Paul revealed when we went to your birthday celebration and we
we'll
saw
talk
it.
about this.
The punchline was kind of orphaned from a previous gag. They left it in. It's still funny, even outside of the context.
Well, just to fill our cinema community in, they missed my 50th birthday. So let's fill the cinema community in. On my 50th birthday, it was, what do you want to do? Do you want a party? Do you want a nice meal? What do you want to go somewhere? What do you want to do? And I said, I want to see Pee Wee Herman. Or Paul Rubens was in our nearby city, literally on my birthday. How much better could it be? I know he planned it just for me. And he answered questions for hour and a half. And then they showed Pee-wee's Big Adventure on the big screen. And we're talking big screen. I couldn't even tell you how many people were in that theater, like 1,000 people.
The entire theater was packed. So I think about
it was a sold out experience.
I would say about 3,000 people knowing that.
3,000 people. Okay. Obviously, I'm looking at the screen, not everybody around me. But it was the funniest thing that all these years I laugh at this movie. I know you appreciate this movie. Your dad, I think, has warmed up to the movie over the years and now laughs at the movie as well. But to have 3,000 people saying the lines together, there's like a little...
It was like a little murmur. It was interesting.
Oh, it was hilarious.
It was like I was watching it at home with 3,000 people, number one. Number two, it felt like the most wholesome screening of Rocky Horror Picture Show that I'm ever going to be part of.
Oh, yeah. I remember that back in the day.
It just felt so warm. It felt inviting. It just created this. There were a few people that mentioned that they had never seen the movie before in the audience.
That's true. That is true. But for the most part, I would say people had seen it. And in hearing a sea of 3,000 people laughing at the same part.
And this is a diverse audience of people.
Oh,
this is
very
not
much.
all one kind of people. This is a diverse audience of people enjoying this film. And I think that was really powerful to me.
Well, and I appreciate that too, because I understand, right? I have nostalgia and that sort of thing. And not every movie I saw when I was a teenager, I still love and find fun.
I really think that speaks to the timelessness of this movie.
Well, and when we say cult classic, right, that sounds a little, what does that even mean? But to say it's timeless, you and I were having this conversation. It felt like the movie could happen at any time. In Southern California, at any time, this movie could happen. You walk down the street and there's a guy dressed like, Pee-wee riding a bike around. Maybe Venice Beach, but the point is, and it goes to the costuming. The costuming, I know you and I had talked about, was very simple but very iconic.
I think that speaks to the level of the costume design too, is you can immediately tell a lot about a character just by looking at them.
Absolutely right.
And there was some cohesion too. If the costumes felt kind of goofy, they went with the environment, but it just felt exaggerated, but in a grounded kind of way.
No, and that makes sense to me. And I think that there's a part where it can be comedic and goofy, and then you lose sight of what's actually trying to be communicated. And I had a feeling that wasn't the experience. It was like, oh, wait a minute, it's just enough to make the point.
It's a very hyper real world in some ways.
Well, and the coloring is where are my sunglasses when I need them?
Even arguably the second darkest film scene, the one that's in the Satan's Helpers motorcycle club, there's still a
If you have not seen this movie, people are like, I'm sorry, what?
there we go, we grabbed our audience. Even that scene still has punches of color that you can see throughout the scene. It's not very dry. You have these wonderfully rich tones throughout the movie.
I'm still laughing because I'm thinking of our cinema community. They're still stuck on Bikers Club. What? What is he doing in a Bikers Club? Well, you must see the movie and see. And so Tim Burton directed this movie. One of your favorites.
One of my favorites.
One of your favorites. And I know we had talked about some of the choices he had made. There was like a nod to Batman before he even did Batman, but like the original Batman. And some of the in Beetlejuice, right? One of your favorites. How do you feel it measured up to the other Tim Burton movies you like?
I like Tim Burton movies that are a little bit more grounded in reality, but also have that.
This feels like reality. What are you talking about?
No, I'm talking about like things like Big Fish.
Okay. Yeah.
This feels like a comedic take that you would find in a world like Big Fish.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's a good comparison. Do we have any questions from the box?
This movie looks pretty goofy. Is it only for kids? Or do you think other people really would enjoy it? So talk about the audience.
I think the people that are going to enjoy this are people who don't take themselves too seriously and kind of allow themselves to be open to whatever this movie is going to throw at them.
Well, and I agree. I know you and I had talked about Pee-wee's Playhouse, and your comment was, in your mind, Pee-wee's Playhouse came first, and then this movie came second. And it was actually the reverse. And even Pee-wee's Playhouse, I had read an article with Paul Reubens at one point, and he had actually made the comment that this is a show for everyone. It's not watered down. It's not like for adults and kind of like the wink and nod, like, oh, it's, this is something. He wanted it to be clean and fun.
I find it interesting, especially considering that Pee-wee's Playhouse is currently on Max as of the time of this taping of the show. And I watched it, and I could watch it three ways. I could watch it really straight-laced, like it's a Mr. Rogers send-up. I could watch it as a kid, enjoying it, or I could watch it as an adult, just going, there's layers to this joke, and it's funnier.
But it didn't feel disrespectful, and I feel the same thing with the Pee-wee movie. Is it goofy? Indeed. I mean,
it's totally goofy.
It's totally goofy. And like we had said earlier, some people in our cinema community may not like Paul Reubens. His personal life definitely was entangled at different points in his career. Yeah, no. And I would respect that if people are like, I don't know about that one. But as an adult, it's still funny. It's clean and it's funny. Do we have any questions from the box?
Why do you think this movie is a classic and approaches the whole cult status?
I think this movie is a classic because it takes so many different things that are universal to different cultures, but we all find funny. I think the problem that it kind of encroaches on and that veers it into cult status is the way that it mixes these things. It takes things that are considered also very specific in terms of their audience likability, and it mixes them with just a little bit more heft than say, oh, we'll do things everybody likes this much, things not everybody else likes this much, because that's where a film like this usually goes. Instead, it's more of a 60-40 balance. Things not everybody likes, things everybody likes.
Well, and I know we had talked about one of the interesting pieces of trivia that I found interesting. We were laughing about it is this movie, the authors of the screenplay, right? They had literally picked up a book of how to write a screenplay, read through the book, and they just followed it step by step by step. And this movie, as a classic, literally is taught in multiple film schools as the standard for a standard screenplay. 90 minutes, 90 pages. Literally, it reads like the book. So when we say is it a classic, we're like, well, it is. It follows the standard, which is, pretty funny. But I do think that there's a part where, obviously, when I first saw it, I never had thought, oh, it's going to be cult classic. It just was one of those things where it became that.
And I want our cinema community to comment below. Do you think that this movie has the potential to go mainstream? Or is it more of a cult classic in your mind as well?
Rebecca, it is that time of the show where the moths are flying and they don't know where to land when they look at you. Where should the moths land?
The moths should land about 3 moths today.
About 3 moths. All right. Number one reason for 3 moths?
It's a solid movie. To me, it feels a little by the book, but there's...
Literally.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
There's enough engaging elements that keep me guessing.
Although you've seen it many, 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 many times.
That's very true, but I keep finding things to like about it.
Oh, that's a good thing. And as you've grown older,
there's
you
more
still
to appreciate about it.
Wow, I'd be curious to find out when you're my age, if you're like, wow, I think I would see that again.
I know I'm going to see it again. The question is when and with whom. And that's also a good sign of a good movie too, is I want to share this with people.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Well, I'm laughing because I see the look in your face. Oh, where will her moths land today?
I have 2 predictions, so let's see how you do it.
Wow. All right. So I would say 4.5.
Oh, okay. So you landed on my first one.
Okay. So 4 1/2, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a great movie. It makes me laugh still. The fact that I would literally spend my 50th birthday with you and your dad
And
skip everything else to see this movie with 3,000 strangers, or I don't know, 2,097.
2,997.
Yeah,
yes.
so 997 strangers, and laugh and still enjoy it. I think that really says something. And then wanting to share it with your dad, wanting to share it with you, wanting to share it with other people, share it with our cinema community. I think that says something.
Well, and it's not in a share it in a, oh my gosh, this movie is so bad, you have to watch this with me. It's like, this movie is so fun. You want to sit down and watch this with me.
Exactly, to share it in a really good and positive way. Thank you for watching this Cocoon Cast clip. This clip was taken from our weekly show, which is released on Saturdays.
If you enjoyed this video, click the link or head over to our main channel for more movie reviews, Hollywood news with a slice of snark. Thank you for watching, and remember,
Movies are
better together.